All right, well, welcome to a little bit of gloomy day here in Northern Virginia / outside of the DMV, DC area. Joe is in Arlington, I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, but happy to have everybody here and joining us for our webinar today, which is entitled Sell Smarter. Welcome to the age of data-driven exhibit sales. So my name is Eric Misic. I'm joined by Joe Colangelo, who's also going to be presenting today. So definitely looking forward to a lively discussion as always on our webinars. If you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the question box and we'll get to those throughout today's discussion. We won't wait till the end to get to them. We want to make sure that we're engaged throughout with you all. So really appreciate, again, having everyone on. So just a little background on us is when we started as a company, Joe and I actually used to work together at BIO, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, prior to starting Bear Analytics. And so this subject that we're talking about today, this theme of selling smarter, brings Joe and I back about 8 or 9 years at BIO, where I was working on the exhibit sales team, selling exhibit space and sponsorships. Joe and his team were selling what was really structured networking. And our teams together started taking a data-driven approach to our sales tactics, started showing our exhibitors reports and outcomes, even during space selection. And it was amazing what we started to see from people. Their eyes started to light up. Joe, you remember you were in the thick of it with me. We had folks really just like vying for space and we're saying, I need this space. Why'd you give it to this person? I had good numbers, right? And so it's really interesting to see that kind of addiction take place to stats and engagement and people we were being transparent with folks. And what we found though is, really nothing's changed today. Exhibitors are looking to meet more of the right people, especially as we get back to in person. They want to get in front of their customers. And back then, the data was pretty minimal in terms of what was available compared to what data we have available today that we can collect in and around our events. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today is selling smarter. We're going to talk about how do we show an exhibitor the value of exhibiting at our events, be able to showcase benchmarks that show engagement to these exhibitors, and then how do we tailor our audience, our attendee audience, to meet the right targets for these exhibitors. So Joe's going to walk us through that today, some best practices, what we're seeing in the marketplace, what we're doing for our clients, and I definitely want to have an engaging discussion here with you all. So again, put any questions you have throughout the presentation in the chat box. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks for the background. I think, we're on like webinar 5 or 6, and I can tell you right now that was Eric's best background yet, because like he said, it was near and dear to our hearts back then. The overarching goal hasn't changed. We were working together during kind of that the post financial recession time as well. So another time frame, obviously a little different than what we're seeing back to live, but still, with a kind of depressed set of expectations, with exhibitors going, you really got to woo me to come back. And the place that I want to start, today's discussion, we're going to kind of try to take you through an amalgamation of what we hear as challenge or pain points from our clients and what they're doing to see success from an exhibit sales standpoint. And when I say exhibit sales, please understand that it's not just first-time folks. It's not just bringing back repeat exhibitors. It's not just upselling, but it's also the retention component too. We're hearing from more and more people that retention is a big focus on their mindset because everyone went from 0 to now trying to do something. We'll also cover a little bit on the virtual side of things, but today's discussion is largely going to be focused on in-person. And so the first place we'll start is just talking about what we're seeing in the data from the last 24 months. Number one, across events, but regardless of the modality that it's being delivered in, is that there's more data being collected than ever. So even though there was a real reduction and for certain months just no in-person events going on, and those transitioned to virtual events, and now we're starting to see more in-person or live events with hybrid events, The technology systems and the event tech platforms out there have done a really nice job of collecting not just more data for the sake of data collection, but more meaningful information, and they're creating internal systems and standards to make sure that they're putting you, their clients, in a better position to collect meaningful information. So the total denominator of data is larger, which is net a good thing. We're also seeing that virtual events really did a great job of capturing a differentiated audience. It wasn't, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, it wasn't the same audience from your in-person event participating virtually, and that unlocked a couple of things. Sure, there was a number of challenges with that, but that unlocked a couple of things. Geographic diversity of attendees, generally younger or earlier in career professionals and attendees, more first-timers getting access to what event organizers were offering from an experience and a content standpoint. And it really elevated, moving into that third bullet point, content delivery mechanisms. It's still a mad dash for improving what that delivery mechanism on content looks like. Getting back to in-person is exciting for folks on the audience acquisition and the exhibitor and sponsorship front, because we noticed an absence of their longtime loyalists participating and materially participating in virtual, meaning even if they did register, they had some of the lower dwell times, they weren't checking out all aspects of the virtual platform. Now, as we trend back into in-person, our platform Bear IQs is showing stats where those folks, those long-term loyalists, are actually registering 7 to 8 days earlier in the reg cycle. Now, first timers are going completely in the other direction. So unfortunately, you're probably feeling like there's a lot of later registrations coming in, or your early reg, if you just launched reg, is lighter than it has been pre-pandemic. But the folks that are coming in are more likely to be those long-term loyalists. And then just getting back to this, what we call networking or structured meetings, it's a very deliberate exercise to make sure you're meeting the right folks. And again, some of this is being technology enabled, and some of it is absolutely being driven by exhibitor expectations. I want to make sure that the people I need to talk to, whether that's current clients, future prospects, or my marketplace that I'm trying to educate on my product or service offerings, are actually going to be there. And so that all wraps into what we're going to be talking about today. Is we know that exhibitor ROI increases massively with face-to-face, and so how can we really double down on making sure your 2022 event, or if you've already had it, your 2023 event is engaging as possible from an exhibitor standpoint. And so we're going to bifurcate today's discussion into, when we talk about how to kind of sell exhibitors, there's going to be this pre-event sales, and that might be actually bringing people, as you heard me reference earlier, bringing new exhibitors or folks that are currently on the sidelines as prospects into the fold, getting to actually sign a contract, actually cut a check, actually commit to some floor space. But it also includes those other two aspects, which is that retention aspect, keeping them committed, and then being able to upsell them on, here's what we believe your engagement will look like on site if you pull the lever on a couple of these sponsorships. And we'll show you how to take a data-driven approach to those, as well as some examples in a demo environment. And then what does the universe look like on site or post-event? I know a lot of folks on today's call probably do on-site space selection. And so it's really hard, especially if you're doing sales pre or the first day of the event, to be able to turn the data around and say like, hey, this is what your experience has been so far. But if we're talking the last day of the show or the weeks following the show, there's definitely a lot more powerful insights that you can share, again, to level set what the exhibitor's expected value or expected return is going to be on their investment. And hopefully what you'll find is, by taking a more data-driven approach, it's not just about their participation at your event, but it also hopefully differentiates you in an increasingly competitive environment. So when they're looking at their portfolio of shows that they're attending, they know that your event or your events are the ones where they can expect their post-show report. They know you're going to be transparent in communicating with them on what the attendee landscape looks like leading into the event, and then hopefully that leads to, as it should, increased commitment both financially and from a space standpoint to your show. Okay, so let's start with pre-event. So pre-event really comes down to what I call the expected value, or the setting the expectation for the exhibitors. That's the story of who is your audience. The bigger or the better the command that you have over your audience and how it's shaping, the more directly and I think desirably you can speak to your exhibitors. So how well do you have the command over? Are you transparent with them, sharing, and if not absolute numbers, percent breakdowns in varying demographics? This is kind of the lowest hanging fruit, right? Who are the demos that are coming in from a registration standpoint? How does that compare to what you were seeing pre-pandemic? Again, common fields that are easier to get to, right? Things like job roles and titles, buying authority. If you have a buyer seller trade show is like a fantastic one. If there's anything in, we'll get to persona descriptions in a second. That's the graphic that you see up there on the upper right-hand side. But anything in the intent or psychographic area. Yes, I'm here to purchase. I'm here to purchase at this level. I'm here to purchase in these key innovative areas. Again, we're not talking about boiling the ocean from a question standpoint, but if you can inform the exhibitor about what the audience looks like and the composition of that audience. 33% are senior titles that have a buying budget of over 5 million and expect to make purchases in 2022 or the next calendar year. That's an impactful statement. It's also extremely impactful from a reinforcement standpoint. This is one of the big unlocks or ahas that we're hearing from our clients right now. It's not just about putting those stats in a sell sheet or a sales guide and sending the PDF over and saying I did my duty. There needs to be more of an active communication plan. So whether it comes to continually, emailing them and saying, look how our figures have changed, look how the mix has changed, we know what is going on, to let's actually coach you on what we're seeing in the data and talk about where we think, things are going to be by showtime on a webinar, perhaps like we're doing right now. That's critically important because their internal budgeting, again, what we're hearing, their internal budgeting and willingness to travel, or if they're even allowed to travel, decision-making is changing very rapidly. It's still a fluid environment. So being able to surface almost real-time or just-in-time data to your exhibitors could put you ahead of your competitors.
And we heard that last week, right, from Denise on our webinar, that they were sharing that. She shared transparently. They were sharing that leading up to their event, telling the exhibitors, here's what we got, here's what happens this week, and the exhibitors were eating it up and felt more confident, and they were able to share that with their exhibit sales team, who was able to talk on the phone. They were shared on webinars, and everybody felt like, okay, we're trending in the right direction for their show.
Yeah, that was a great example. If you go to our YouTube page, you'll be able to see that entire webinar with the additional context that Eric just mentioned. And we're hearing more and more of those discussions because client relationships need to be elevated right now. I'm not telling you guys this. We're hearing this from our prospects and clients in the marketplace. And data is a great way to tell that story. One, because it shows you understand the product and the experience that you're putting out there, and two, you're giving them something that they've really been asking for a long time, but at a more granular level. And so, kind of speaking to the two visuals that you see there, you can put something with relatively basic stats in front of your exhibitors to start the story, to feed the story. It's not going to be the complete story. They want to know, is the booth next to a column? Is it near the aisle? How close is the bathroom and the food and the coffee? All the traditional questions that you've gotten from a blocking and tackling standpoint. But then setting the data atmosphere of what else can they expect in those serendipitous interactions is absolutely crucial. And the good news is there's more data than ever. There's better event tech tools collecting this information for you, and surfacing it has never been easier. And so, Eric, I'm going to pause there because then we're going to spend a good portion on the rest of today's discussion on the post-event exhibitor analytics. Do we have any questions from the crowd?
Just one that I think you touched on about the metrics sharing during the cycle. So like understanding attendee stats and demographics, but how granular, maybe just to add to the question, how granular should you be getting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one, if you're not doing anything, then the first level of granularity is do something, right? From there, oftentimes you're going to start with here are the demos, and probably here's where it compares to 1 or 2 years ago, the last time we were in this city, something like that. Obviously, in the last 2 years, the world's evolved. I assume your industries have evolved quite a bit as well. So if you want to take it to the next level, it's really matching up that audience demographic with that exhibitor demographic, and then the audience psychographic information with the exhibitor psychographic information. So how many exhibitors go, we're here for new business, we're here to meet with XYZ number of clients, this is what would make this event a home run for us. And then talking to audience members, here's how much we're willing to purchase, these are the areas that we're willing to purchase it in, and making sure that the psychographic information matches with that exhibitor firmographic information. That's probably the next level that you would want to go to.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. All right. Yeah, let's keep going, Joe. That's the one question that we got there.
Okay, so let's talk about post-event. So post-event is a little different, right? Because at this point in time, the experience has happened. The data is a little bit more static as opposed to trying to share some audience data leading in, where there's definitely a dynamicism to it. You start to try to push the energy leading into the event. But post-event, it's not just about justifying the experience, but it's also about talking about what to expect going forward. And so first and foremost, when we talk about identifying the path to future performance, and again, TBD on how much of this you want to share with every exhibitor, but certainly you'd want to have something, TBD on how much of this in a dynamic fashion you want to share with an exhibitor, meaning from a dashboarding standpoint. But what you may want to do, a good half measure or half step to get the ball rolling on the conversation, is to establish a benchmark of your show first. So in this example, we have a company, Energy Inc. Again, this is demo data. We're not sharing anything, any private information here. Energy Inc. participated at the 2020 Sports Analytics Conference. They got 97 leads. So having Energy Inc. in this case, let them know where they fall in the mix of all the exhibitors, setting that benchmark of, hey, here's where the average is, maybe here's where the top quartile is, the bottom quartile, and then using your other companies, blinded out, of course, as an example, laying out the sponsorship, the location, the booth size to move effectively right on the chart. So how do we go from somewhere, over here to moving them across the threshold into here? Walk them through what that level of investment looks like. So it might be, hey, you're upgrading from a 10 by 10. We can put you in a more premium area of the show floor with a 20 by 20. 20 by 20s typically have 162% more leads than the average 10 by 10. And if we upgrade you from no sponsorship to a tier 2 sponsorship, here's what we would expect, right? That's something where the individual who's in whether it's an on-site space selection or on the phone after the event, is coming in and can say, okay, I can really get to a willingness to pay for XYZ number of leads. If they got 97 leads and they weren't satisfied with that, but 240 leads is something that's more interesting to them, you're giving them the exact price point on how to get there. And it's a great way, not that it's going to be a perfect science, you're not guaranteeing this, but it's a great way to put expectation values and attributing that to an increase in investment. And so you're kind of productizing the experience as much as you can from a data standpoint. And this is, again, one benchmark out of a few that we're going to go through. But again, this isn't about doing a lot or being overly complex. It's about doing a few of the right things early on, learning, evolving, and going from there. So let's get a little bit deeper. How do we talk a little bit more about who the audience composition kind of looks like and how well they did? So again, we're seeing here a highlight from a post-event report one page. Again, this is using largely registration data and lead retrieval. We're not even talking about sophisticated things like, Beacon and computer vision and some of the tools that are here today and coming tomorrow. But being able to aggregate, organize, and tag your data the right way, we can then start to give the exhibitor an understanding on what their booth looked like relative to either the entire exhibit floor, or if you wanted to break things down, other organizations like yours, similar industry type, or other things like all other 20 by 20s. There's a couple of ways that you can slice and dice the data to compare what we call these blinded out benchmarks. Again, we're not saying company X, this is how you compare to company Y. It's, hey, company X, this is how you compare to all the other companies that fit this certain criteria. And the real win here is then being able to assess how closely does this align with what their expectations are and what they hope to achieve. And so this is where the sales component, I think, comes in, because as we know, anytime you're dealing with a benchmark, you're going to have a portion that knocked it out of the park, top 20% of achievers. And they're going to be happy with their experience. They're going to be excited to come back. There's going to be groups that are going to be having the opposite of that. And so how to use the data to talk about, well, hey, it's not the whole show is a mess. It's maybe you didn't get as many senior level folks as you were hoping. Here are a couple of ways that we can drive more senior level people to engage with you. You may never get the presidents and the CEOs at the back of the show floor. Let's work on getting your priority points up for the next couple of years. But in the interim, we're going to let you sponsor the CEO lunch, right? So you guys are really good at understanding how to put different value propositions together. The data is empowering that. It's not replacing it. So we're getting to more of the right things earlier. Eric, the universal symbol for question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you're right on track with this question that just came in here. So the question is, communicating audience details leading up to the event. What if your audience numbers aren't so great? How do you communicate to the exhibitor about the audience that are already registered? So I think you touched on it a little bit, but looks like more specifics there.
Yeah, so I would be shocked if most people weren't in this bucket, right? So example, 10 weeks out from the event, we'll just use round numbers. 10 weeks out from the event, we traditionally have 5,000 people registered. This year, we only have 3,000 registered. That's the bucket that most folks returning to live for the first time in 2022 are going to find themselves in, with the exceptions of certain like hot industries and hot geographies and things like that. And it'll continue to evolve as the year rolls on, hopefully, and we put the pandemic farther and farther behind us. That will absolutely happen. So the way to have that conversation 10 weeks out is to talk about the composition. So effectively using percentages to normalize it. The other thing to do is to make sure that you can reasonably set expectations on the total number. I'll get to that in a second. So I'll go back to this like seniority bucket because I'm looking at it right here. So if you're used to having 17% of your audience being president and CEO individuals, and now you're seeing 15% of that group, how does the rest break down? Share with it in a normalized way. Regardless of how registration is trending, you can do that. But let's not obfuscate what we're ultimately worried about, which is the total number of individuals. So this is where you really want to take advantage of some of the predictive tool sets that you can use. So because registration trajectories look different, it's really easy for us to apply the mechanism that we're seeing across all events and say, hey, even though you're at 3,000, historically, you've been at 5,000, your event maybe gets to 15,000. This year, you're likely to end up at, 14,200. It won't feel like that when you're 10 weeks out, but we are seeing a later ramp up. And so then you can give, that number's a little harder to get to without a predictive element, but then you can get a little bit closer to setting the expectations on, we're actually only expecting reg, to be down 10 to 15%, but our composition looks really strong. Here's what it looks like, compared to pre-pandemic. And again, I think don't underestimate the impact of just knowing your numbers is going to have.
Yeah. We're in that quality versus quantity kind of conversation. I think shows the chord with folks. Everybody's looking for transparency. They know that things may be lower. They know they're 2 years removed from the audience. I don't think anyone's like, we're going to blow it out of the gate, and they don't want you to lie to them, right? So if you're being honest, they're like, okay, well, I can live with that. It's going to be the right people that I need to see as a business, right?
Yep, that's right. And so just talking about how to get started, because that's usually the next question we get. Number one is making sure that you collect the right data. So that doesn't mean, I have pulled out a little bit of an excerpt here of what, a data stack may look like. Chances are you're probably not doing all of these things under each category. That's okay. But understanding what you are doing and what data is available, and do your systems talk, or are they integrated together, that's always step one. Because if you're not collecting the data, it doesn't matter how cool is the tool that you have to analyze it. So step one is kind of doing what we call this, data map exercise. And so by and large, table stakes, reg, lead retrieval, maybe you're doing something on the on-demand content standpoint, you can get pretty far with just those three without getting into some of the fancier stuff that's coming. The other thing is, when we think about this, we want to encourage thinking like a brand. So if you're the exhibitor, they're there to do a number of different things. It's a brand awareness exercise. They're there to meet new customers. They're there to meet with existing customers, and they're there to walk people and work them through the funnel. So that being said, it's really critical to be able to surface who are those folks, and are they be able to see that data afterwards. Now I'll show you an example real quick of what that might look like. Just bear with me here as I get my other screen up. And I'll just show this 2 seconds on how we do this in Bear IQ in a dynamic way. Everything we've talked about previously has been static, and that's great. But if you wanted to go in and, for example, suck in just lead retrieval data, combine it with reg data, you'd be able to create a repository where you can click on an exhibitor, get an update on who the persona level looks like, in this case, level of interest. I can really quick go in and say, show me how many titles. 49% of the folks that, badged into this exhibitor were president or CEOs. And then I actually get all of the underlying information, including things, if you're collecting it, like dwell time or online views to a product page, right? So there, you can get really complex with it. Now, we're not seeing yet folks open this up and turn it into something that they let their exhibitors kind of log into, but you can absolutely PDF this, ship it with a thank you note, and say, if you want to dig in more to the details, let us know. And so that's kind of the current state of the art that we're seeing in the marketplace right now. We got 2 minutes left. Eric, any questions on the board?
I think you may have touched on this, but sharing reports with exhibitors, what are we seeing for clients doing that currently? Like, what are they sending folks?
Nice. Okay, guess the last one right there. Most of the time it's a PDF of, hey, here's the summary. Again, not something that we're seeing here in a dynamic fashion. PDF seems to be what folks are most comfortable with, leading into a follow-up conversation. We are sometimes seeing Excel exports of the lead data going out, but what you're doing there is you're really relying on the exhibitor to do something with it, absence of the context of who those people are. So I think in the very short term, we're going to be seeing more of this start to blend together.
Got it. Well, we're right on time, Joe. We appreciate you walking us through all that, and thanks to everyone for being on. And if you have any other questions, you can always hit us up at hello@bearanalytics.com. Follow us on Twitter at our handle there. But really appreciate everybody joining us. We'll be coming out with our April webinar schedule very soon. We have some heavy hitters lined up, some clients at the end of the month of April that I think you won't want to miss for sure. We'll be announcing that soon. So again,
yeah, we got a big success story coming in at the end of April. I hope he can make it, because they're killing it right now. So I'm excited to showcase that.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll give you a minute back, and appreciate your time today. Have a great one.
Thanks, Alan.